Hi, I'm Natalie Otteson, and you're listening to the Mindset School for Soulful Entrepreneurs, episode number 32. Welcome to the Mindset School podcast, a show for spiritual entrepreneurs who are ready to stop feeling stuck, reconnect to their soul's purpose, and create a deeply fulfilling life and business. I'm Natalie Otteson, transformational life coach and reconnection healing foundational practitioner. And I can help you scale and grow a six-figure business from a place of inner authority, wisdom, knowledge, and truth. If you are a spiritual entrepreneur and you are looking to take that first step towards your dream of running your own business, this is the show for you. Ready to step into your power and move forward with clarity and purpose? Let's go. Welcome back to part 2 of this little mini series, diving deeper into the different modalities that I personally use in my spiritual entrepreneurial business. And I wanted to dive deeper into each of these because they may be of interest to you, and it may be something that you want to pursue on your own journey as a spiritual entrepreneur. So today I wanted to dive deeper into astrology, one of my favorite things that I have learned since 2016. So I wanted to talk about this today, dive a little bit deeper, talk about a few of the main points when I read somebody's astrology chart, or when I look at somebody's astrology chart to incorporate into our coaching sessions or even into our energy healing sessions. I've got a couple main points that I focus on to help me get more information or get to know my client on a deeper and more beautiful level. So today we're going to talk about the sun, the moon, the ascendant or rising sign, Saturn, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the North Node as well again. So I know I did a podcast on this, so you can go back and check that episode out as well if you want a deeper dive into the North Node. So I thought for today's purposes, I would share my chart with you so that I can kind of relate this to what my signs are and how they relate to me. And then hopefully it will give you some excitement on figuring out your own as well. And if you are wanting to figure out how to look at your own birth chart, which can look like Chinese if you're looking at it, astrology is basically like learning a foreign language. It takes time and dedication and learning to figure out your own astrology chart. And you can always just go to different sites and look at your astrology for today or for the day. But it is so much more than just, we think that it's just our sun sign. Like I'm a Sagittarius sun, and we think that that's kind of it. It's just my sun sign. And so many people, I hear this all the time. They're like, I don't really relate to my sun sign. And that can have to do with if we're living in the high road or the low road of our sun sign, or maybe there's other aspects in our chart that are bringing other personalities out that are kind of driving the ship, so to speak. So if you're interested in looking at your own birth chart, there's probably several different places that you can do this. I personally use astro.com, which is a free horoscope or a free birth chart site where you can plug in your information and you can kind of see the snapshot or blueprint of who you are. So I will link that in the show notes so you can go there and enter your own birth information if you want to and see more into your own birth chart. Or you can always book a reading with me as well, and I will link that in the show notes as well. Let's dive into what are sun, moon, and rising, okay? That's one of the main pieces. It kind of shows us like what our character is and who we are. So what is our sun sign? So most of you probably know what your sun sign is already. As I mentioned, I am a Sagittarius sun, and the sun sign represents your ego. So that is how you show up every single day. Just like the sun rises in the sky and the sun just shines brightly, that is your main astrological sign. For me, it's Sagittarius. Now, mine is in Sagittarius in the 4th house. So specifically, my ego is really rooted in family and kind of this inner security. So having that sense of inner security. And I'm going to have a big emphasis and importance on home and family and having emotional security. A Sagittarius kind of twist is that the influence of Sagittarius speaks to a dynamic relationship with my roots. So perhaps a multicultural background or a family that encourages exploration. So living into this energy as the Sagittarius in the fourth house is all about understanding that my deepest sense of self is rooted in my origins and my emotional landscape. And being a Sagittarius, that energy invites me to keep expanding. So the Sagittarius is kind of the gypsy, the student, the philosopher, the shaman. It is a fire sign, which can be, think of that kind of fiery type energy. So overall, I can see the big picture, and I'm kind of an endless optimist when it comes to spirituality. And I love to travel and seek new things. And I'm constantly looking for, higher education. So school has actually always been so important to me. Some of the low road of a Sagittarius is, number one, we can put our foot in our mouth. Oh my gosh. If I had a quarter for every time I put my foot in my mouth, I'd be rich. No, seriously though, we can put our foot in our mouth. We can say things. We can be very blunt and say things in a very maybe not so nice way, not coming from any mean-spirited place, but we can just be really blunt and be truthful. That cannot always come across the best. So there are many times in my life where I have said something and I'm like, oh my gosh, that probably sounded terrible and I didn't mean that. And then there's another part of my chart that goes in and analyzes that over and over and over again. So we also kind of need to look at moderation. We can kind of get indulgent and get caught up in some of that indulgent type lifestyle. So not being moderated can kind of be a low road for us as Sagittarius. Emotional honesty, learning our own emotional honesty is really important. And if we're not doing that, that's kind of our low road. And then kind of staying open-minded. So those are some of the low road of a Sagittarius. Esoterically, for a Sagittarius, we are always seeking truth first. We are here to awaken, like bringing that fire out and bringing that energy and moving into our own truth and our own knowledge and really expanding into that higher knowledge and truth. Our sun sign, again, it really is our ego. It's like breathing. It's how we just show up every single day. And we're here to be in our egos. But it isn't what we want driving the ship. So I'll talk about that in just a second. So the next one, so that's our sun. The next one is our moon sign. That is our emotional side. In fact, if your back is up against a wall, your moon is going to be how you respond. So my moon is in Capricorn, and that is an earth energy. So earth energies have a lot to do with practicality and structure and organization. And Capricorns are kind of the hermit. They're the world leaders. They're the timeless teachers. So my Capricorn moon happens to be in the fourth house as well as my sun. And so what that means is that, again, I'm deeply connected to my home life, especially in matters of relating to mother and maternal figures. Having this Capricorn in my fourth house is really about creating stability, and it really is influenced by this placement. So, having emotional solace in traditions and structures and even in career achievements that make me feel at home. So in order to kind of integrate my moon, my emotional energy, it's important for me to harmonize with this energy and do grounding practices that offer emotional stability. one of the reasons I love my mindfulness practice is because it creates that structure and that balance and that organization for me every day. What's fascinating is that I've got a sun in fire and I've got an earth and moon. And when you think about putting those two elements together, when you think about fire and earth, if you put dirt on top of fire, it can kind of smother that fire. So it's so important for me to have my ego in place, but to not let my emotions kind of smolder out this fire that I have inside of me. So fascinating and so interesting. So some of the low road of a Capricorn moon is having humility. So as a Capricorn moon, it's important for me to stay humble and to kind of keep my arrogance in check and to really be in the role of the teacher. Esoterically for me, moving forward and being in my highest version of my Capricorn moon is really finding my purposefulness and really tapping into the higher wisdom, the higher knowledge, the higher truth, this timeless wisdom, and really stepping into that and letting that really come forward and really kind of putting the ego aside to some degree. So having this earth energy really does help kind of keep that ego in check and really helping me step into, my destiny, my ambition, and my maturity, and also kind of staying in that conservative and that cautious place, having that security, that sense of security emotionally. So our sun is our ego, our moon is our emotions. Then we have our ascendant or our rising sign. Now, this is known when you know your birth time. If you don't know your birth time, we can kind of guess. Most of the time we put it at noon, but it varies for every 2 hours of the 24 hours of a day. Every 2 hours, your rising sign shifts. And so if you know the time that you were born, it's really important when you're doing an astrology reading to know the time that you're born, because then you can truly know what your ascendant sign is. And that is in esoteric law. And I love this because the person I studied from was Deborah Silverman, and she does more esoteric astrology. Your rising sign is really, what are you rising to in this lifetime? What are you ascending into? So our suns are ego, our moons are emotions, and our rising sign is really our soul sign. It is what we came to encompass in this lifetime. It is what we want driving the ship. And as little children, our soul sign, our rising sign, is what we encompass. But once we move more into our teenage years, we step into ego because it's so important to be loved and liked and popular. And we kind of put the soul part of us aside, and we kind of have a resistance against it as well. And it's not until we're really ready to step back into our soul essence that it comes back around. And it is the part of us that we want to learn and we want to master. We really want to master our soul sign, our rising, our ascendant rising. So for me, I am a Virgo rising. I am the servant. I am the perfectionist. I am the analyzer. I am here to be of service to other people. And I'm here to analyze and create structures and organizations and to really step into that part of my personality in this life. So one of the life lessons or the low road of a Virgo is judging ourselves and judging others. And, my mentor, she says, the Virgos are probably one of the hardest signs in the zodiac because we are so critical of ourselves. We are way more critical of ourselves than anybody ever is or would be of us. And so, really learning to put that criticism aside. Oh, it makes me a little emotional because we can be, number one, like a permission for a Virgo is you are doing so much better than you think you are. And really learning the low road is being stuck in that self-criticism. And when you can really put that aside and really step into kind of the purity of your thought and your body and your mind, and really keep an open heart and move into the highest version of yourself, that's when you really move into service. So the rising sign or ascendant really does represent that outward personality and life path. Again, as a Virgo rising, being defined by this service, this purity, this meticulous planning, and growing into this lifetime. So again, your rising sign is really this part of this soulful journey of you rising and growing in this lifetime at your soul's ultimate aim. Okay, so the next piece is Saturn. This is the next piece that I look at in the chart. And Saturn is all about our life lessons. It is, and in fact, Saturn takes about 28 to 30 years to come full circle. That's how long it takes to transit around the Earth. And so every about 7 years, we kind of have a Saturn, a life lesson check-in. So you can look at what was going on when you were 7, 14, 21, 28 to 30-ish, around there, and so on and so forth. So around every 7 years, we have a Saturn check-in. But when we are 28 to 30 years old, that is when we have Saturn returns. We call it a Saturn return, and Saturn comes knocking. Different planets rule different parts of the body, and Saturn rules the knees. And actually, interestingly enough, our teeth are linked to almost every part of our body. But if we're not doing the things that we're here to do, if we're not here to learn the life lessons that we're here to learn, Saturn can literally bring us to our knees. And it's so interesting, when you see people who get stuck in addiction or things like that, there's so many people who struggle or don't make it through their 28 to 30th year of life, because when Saturn comes and knocks on your door, if you're not doing the things that you need to be doing, it's going to bring you to your knees. So my Saturn happens to be in the second house, which is in Libra, which is all about life lessons in values and self-worth. And it's all about relationship for me. So my life lessons are all about dealing with my own self-worth, my own values, and building those relationships with the people in my life. So again, Saturn in the second house for me, it really does indicate these life lessons resolving around material security, the self-worth, these value systems. And with having Libra's influence in there, the challenge often comes with, again, relationships, or it can even indicate legal matters as well, that really prompt me to reassess what I value the very most. So for me, it's really about learning to balance my material desires with my deeper spiritual needs, and to figure out who and how and what kind of relationships I want in my own life. So Saturn, depending on where it's at in your chart, and again, you can go look on astro.com and pull up your own chart and see where Saturn is. And then you can start doing some Googling and see what your own life lessons are. And again, these are going to hit you about every 7 years and kind of do a check-in until you come about 28 to 30 around. And then it's going to be the big lessons, like the big, are you doing what you need to be doing type of a thing. So that's Saturn, and Saturn rules our life lessons. The last little piece that I look at in a chart is, again, the North Node. So I've talked about this before, but I want to talk about it again because it really is our shortcut to enlightenment. And the North Node is really about our soul's destiny in this lifetime that gives us this shortcut to get to where it is that we need and want to go. Mine is located in the 11th house in Cancer. So mine is all about friendships and groups and societal values. And this placement for me specifically suggests that my spiritual growth is connected to the collective experience. With it being in Cancer, so Cancer is, they show it as the crab, but it's got that hard external shell, but that ooey gooey goodness inside. So with my North Node being in Cancer, my emotional intelligence, my nurturing, my forming deep connections is so important for me. In fact, when I was doing my own research on my North Node, vulnerability was one of those key pieces for me, was tapping into that vulnerability and sharing with other people, because that is how I build connection. And I do that through, friendships and groups and, again, social media, the kind of collective. And so it's kind of being that mother to the collective. So really activating the North Node, for me, it's about engaging in community service or joining spiritual groups or running spiritual groups or allowing myself to nurture and be nurtured, really stepping into that vulnerability and being vulnerable with others. And again, that's why I created Soul Sister Coaching, was so I could start creating that community out there with the people that I love the very most. So Sun is ego, Moon is emotions, your ascendant or your rising sign, that's going to be the soul. So that's going to be like what you're ascending into. Your Saturn, that is all about your life lessons and what you're here to learn in this life. And your North Node is truly your shortcut to enlightenment. And so when I take all of these pieces, those are basically the 5 elements that I really jump into in the beginning of a reading of a chart. I also look at the chart itself, and whatever kind of pops out to me, I focus on that as well. And then one other aspect that I do kind of focus on is your progressed moon. So that's a little bit more advanced. And I'll talk about that at a later point in time, because I think that that's a fun little topic. But that kind of gives you an indication of like what's coming up over the next 2.5 years of your life, depending on where it's at. And I actually recently had a beautiful client that I love so much. She reached out to me recently. And when I did her astrology reading, I gave her some of her information about her progressed moon and that it would soon be moving into Cancer. And Cancer, again, is kind of that emotional. It could indicate a move. It could indicate a baby, things like that. And she's moving into that time period of her life. And so much of what I talked about in her astrology chart is coming up now. And she just expressed to me how grateful she was for the reading that I gave her and how anchoring it was for her and what a beautiful experience it was for her as well. So again, those are kind of some of the things that I love to dive into when I'm looking at an astrology chart, and then being able to take some of these key pieces and being able to plug them into your coaching session. For instance, if you are a Virgo rising, if let's say you're a Sagittarius sun and you're kind of the know-it-all, because that's what we are as Sagittarius. So you're the seeker, you're the teacher, but you're really here to be of service. Like, how can we, number one, make sure that you're in the high road of that Sagittarius sign, but how do we move you into the servant? How do we put down, like for myself, I'm pretty dang self-critical. And especially when things happen in my life where, somebody does criticize me. Number one, nobody can criticize me more than I can criticize myself. So I will always analyze and overanalyze my own behavior more than anybody else could ever do for me. So that's number one. But number two, like, how do I really put that criticism down? How do I put that judgment down for myself and really move into the higher version of who I am meant to be, which is this purity, again, of thought, body, mind. And if my Saturn, which is life lessons, is all dealing with relationships, how am I doing in that area? And so knowing this as a coach, I can work with somebody and say, hey, this is where I struggle. I struggle in relationship. I struggle in finding that balance, making sure that I'm looking at my self-worth and my values, and I'm operating from that space. And knowing that about myself is such a beautiful gift. And helping you know that about yourself is a beautiful gift for you as well. Also knowing that to keep this open heart. And I, again, as an emotional person, when I get into my emotions and my back's up against the wall, this is how I'm going to respond. Am I responding from a low road state, or am I responding from that arrogance or, Am I having humility, or am I really tapping into my own wisdom and my truth and my knowledge and my own power, but doing it from a place of humility? So it's things like that, knowing that information and being able to work with somebody who has that information about me, or me as a coach having that information about you, takes our coaching sessions to a much deeper level that really allows us to pinpoint and define the pieces of who you are and helping you move through your own journey to become the best version of who you are. I hope that this wasn't too confusing. I hope this shed some light on your own astrology chart. And again, if I have a really good friend who's a Cancer, and she often says, I don't fit the Cancer personality. And in my opinion, she truly does, because she's such a beautiful soul. But there's so much more to your chart than just your ego, your sun sign. There is your emotional side. There is your rising sign, which is what you're rising to. And then there's all these other aspects and elements inside of your chart as well that can shape and define your personality that you may not even be aware of. So yes, you may not relate to your sign as much. And interestingly enough, this one friend who says that she doesn't relate to her Cancer personality, she has a lot of Gemini in her chart. And that Gemini kind of like takes over and really, brings out her personality. So, and the Gemini is the communicator. It is that witty type personality. So that's very much who she is. Anyway, so I hope that this was helpful today. Please reach out to me at Soul Sister Coaching on Instagram if you have any questions. Again, I am going to link astro.com so that you can plug in your own birth chart. And I'm also going to add my link if you would like an astrology reading. And I look forward to hearing any questions that you might have. And next week, I will talk more about energy healing. Have a fabulous rest of your week, and I will see you next week. All my love. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of the Mindset School. Ready to dive deeper into finding your purpose and create a deeply fulfilling life? Visit soulsistercoaching.com for more guidance and resources. See you next week.